U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis will be stepping down at the end of February. Mattis' resignation comes a day after President Donald Trump's decision to withdraw 2,000 troops from Syria. In an unsparing written to U.S. President Donald Trump letter, the Secretary of Defense has mentioned that he was stepping down because his views were not aligned to that of the president. Mattis also reiterated his core belief in America's alliance and partnerships and America's need to be resolute and unambiguous in challenging countries such as China and Russia. Shortly before the resignation, President Trump had announced that the defense secretary will be retiring at the end of February after serving his administration for 2 years. Trump even credited Mattis for helping his administration with the purchase of new fighting equipment and helping with other countries to pay their share of military obligations. Jim Mattis is a retired four-star general who served in the military for 4 decades before joining Trump's cabinet. Mattis joins a long list of former Trump administration senior figures who have either quit or been removed. Now, President Trump's administration is now grappling with a series of fallouts tearing to an edge of government shutdown. Now, Giles, this is a very big development. The big question at this point is that did anyone see this coming?
There have been rumours about James Mattis, the US Defence Secretary, for weeks and weeks, perhaps even months now. But really that's no different to a lot of figures within that Trump administration. We see rumours and whispers about so many of them leaving really almost constantly here in Washington. I think James Mattis, his departure and the way that he is doing it is significant because his resignation letter is really a pretty intense attack on President Trump's ideology. He said in that letter that he believes in treating allies with respect. He says he also believes in being clear-eyed about both malign actors and strategic competitors, then by going on to say that his views do not align very closely with President Trump's. Essentially what he's saying here, without actually saying it explicitly, is that Donald Trump does not treat US allies with respect as James Mattis would like him to, and that Donald Trump is not clear-eyed, is not perhaps analytical enough for James Mattis to stay in that very senior position in Donald Trump's cabinet.
Right. Jim Mattis has made it very clear, Giles, that he doesn't see eye to eye with Trump on certain issues. Could you explain what those issues could be which cause friction between the U.S. president and the defense secretary?
Well, the timing of this is absolutely crucial because, of course, as we were just talking about, the United States has now publicly acknowledged that they are going to be pulling troops out of Syria over the coming months. And, of course, now we're getting these multiple media reports that there will also be not a complete withdrawal, but a steady drawdown, a dramatic drawdown of the US presence in Afghanistan as well. Now, according to reports that we've been hearing over the last couple of days, James Mattis was fighting very, very hard to keep US troops in Syria. And previously, we've also seen him fighting very, very hard to keep US troops inside Afghanistan. So I think we can read from his resignation letter, from the timing of this, that James Mattis just couldn't stay in Donald Trump's cabinet if he was going to so dramatically, so swiftly pull these troops out of places like Syria and Afghanistan at such a sort of fragile time in both countries.
Right, Giles. Also, there's one very interesting part in the resignation letter which says that Trump should appoint a Secretary of Defense who matches his views. I found it to be very interesting, and it speaks a lot about the difference in opinion in the Trump administration.
That's right. I think James Mattis departing really comes towards the end of a sort of period, a sort of era in the Trump administration as a whole, because when he started as US president, he very unusually hired a lot of ex-military figures, a lot of generals, his generals as he used to call them, into some very senior positions. And now we've pretty much seen all of them departing the Trump administration one by one. Very early on, we saw Michael Flynn, the very first national security advisor, leaving the White House really in a matter of weeks after a scandal dragged him out. We then saw General McMaster, who's also stepped into that National Security Advisor role. He left the White House after really not that long in that position. We are now seeing John Kelly, who first served as Interior Secretary and subsequently as the Chief of Staff in the White House. He said he's leaving at the end of the year, and now we have James Mattis saying that he's going to retire in February. So really those generals that made up such an important part of Donald Trump's original cabinet are pretty much all departed now.
So, Jayas, is it safe to say that the latest resignation from the Trump administration is a big blow to President Trump?
Well, President Trump is facing sort of problems really on multiple fronts. Not only does he have huge amounts of anger on Capitol Hill about the way that he handled the Syria withdrawal announcement, now he's obviously, or we're expecting him to see a lot of anger about this Afghanistan decision, if indeed these reports that we're seeing across the US media are accurate. And don't forget as well, we are facing a deadline coming up on Friday here in Washington. If the Congress and President Trump can't agree a deal on border security, on funding for the border wall, we could see a government shutdown here, which generally in history, in terms of US history, those government shutdowns when Congress can't agree a deal to keep the government open, those have been very, very dramatically unpopular with the American public. So Donald Trump really fighting fires on multiple fronts here.
Right, Jazz, thank you for joining us with all those updates from Washington, D.C.